Hello, my name is Chris Studebaker, and I'll be giving a presentation and some small demonstrations on report building in NAV 2013. Should take about 45 minutes or so, and we will have time for a question and answer session afterwards. What do we need to start report development? After you install NAV 2013 on your laptop or the customer server, which is hopefully a dedicated development machine, you will need to install 2 or more applications if you haven't already got Visual Studio 2010 Professional. The first installation package needs to be the Visual Web Developer 2010 Express, and then install the Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 Shell Redistributed package. I would recommend downloading both before going to the customer site, as they are both over 100 megabytes. To develop reports is still basically a 2-step process. Design the dataset in Object Designer and the layout in Visual Studio. Here's the anatomy of the report, which is very similar to the old anatomy, but with a few differences. First, data items have columns defined instead of sections as the output. This is the design portion of the report that gathers the data fields from NAV, either table values or variable values, and puts them into a flattened file for Visual Studio to display. Second, you have labels, which are one-time data such as report title, captions, fixed value text constants, etc. Labels are sent to Visual Studio as parameters. The first step in report development starts in the NAV Object Designer with the dataset design. Like the XML port and query designer, we define the dataset using data item, a NAV table, and column, which can be either a field value from a table or a global variable. The data item is a loop mechanism that goes through the records in the table, which is nothing new. The column is not limited to a table field though. It can be a field, variable, expression, such as the report date I'll show in the example shortly, or a text constant. Multiple data items can be related by indentation and data item link and view, such as with a hard-coded filter, just like before. No longer do we need to muck about with sections, thank goodness, and we set the fields and captions all from the dataset designer. Captions are not related to a column, are defined under View Labels. Multi-language reports are handled by the report switching the dataset value language before it is sent to Visual Studio. So it needs to be done from a trigger within NAV, such as the language code on the customer card for a statement or an invoice. Labels are where we can define one-time text values in the report that can be displayed in any section of the Visual Studio layout. The text here is fixed and cannot be changed during runtime. I'm going to walk through an extremely simplistic report of a customer list to review the dataset design in NAV 2013. First, we open up the NAV development environment, which is the old classic client, except we have no forms. We go to Reports, and we're going to click on New. Here is the new dataset designer. I'm going to select my customer table as my table, and from the field menu, I'm going to select name, number, address, city, and go down here to balance. If I click here, do you want to add the fields? Just like the data port and page. And I'm going to make sure that I include the captions here. On the bottom, I'm not going to include a field from the table, but I'm going to put down an expression from NAV. And I'm going to send a formatted date. I'm going to give it a variable name that appears in Visual Studio as report date. I also want to add some labels, or a label, which is a report title. and call it my customer list. So now I've defined my data set. I can go into Visual Studio, open up the layout, and here you can see we have a completely blank template. I'm going to add a header, and I can drop my report title directly into the header without having to use the GetData, SetData functionality, because this is a one-page report essentially. I'm not going to change the record. It's not going to change the header information. In order to view the data set, I go to View Report Data, and here I can see my data source and data set result, and I can drag and drop my, that's the date, parameters, report title, which I can drag and drop right into the text box. And I can go to the text box properties and make it big, bold, and centered. Now for the actual meat of the report, which I'm going to put in a table box, and I'm going to add 3 more columns. Make it a little bit centered. And from here I can actually select the data set names that are going to be repeated within the row, the data row. Actually, I don't need that column. But you can see that the column header here has a caption that I'm not necessarily happy with. This is not the NAV caption, and I can change that one of several ways. One is I can clear out and I can drag and drop from the parameters, or I can go into the expression, find the parameters, and set it there. So then the expression for this value is parameters, exclamation, the name of the parameter dot value. And I'm just going to do that for the others here. And also this number here, I can set the format to be that in NAV. Or if I wanted to, I could go to the text box properties, and it would be controlled from the report, but I could set the custom value to be, local here. But again, that would be within the report and not coming from NAV. So the standard format is just to come from NAV. So I make sure I save the RDLC. I come back into NAV and I load the RDLC into the report, and I save the report. Now at this point I have it saved. I can go run, and it will open up an RTC client, and I can run my report. And the format is as you would expect it from NAV. As shown in the example, Visual Studio has the ability to add a single report header and footer. This needs to be done for each new report. Within the header, you can directly reference field values, usually labels or image variables that are single instance per report. Looping in the body section is done via data region, which can be an individual table or a parent list region with tables inside. To perform page breaks on grouping, you can put a list control that will take up the entire body region, go to the properties, set the dataset name, and adjust the row group properties. All table controls within the list control will inherit the dataset source property. When defining the expression of a control, you can see the repeated dataset values in the fields, dataset _result category, and the captions and labels and the parameters category. Page setup is controlled in Visual Studio. Go to Visual Studio, Menu, Report Properties, and select Page Setup. Any properties defined here will override any information defined in the NAV report properties. Report headers and footers can only utilize single data controls. No data regions are allowed. You can hide the header on all but the first page with a print on first page property. Hide the footer on all but the last page with a print on last page property. One of the major things missing from NAV 2013 reports are wizards and predetermined formatting that has existed since version 1.1 way back in 1996. At the Microsoft presentation, it was hinted very strongly that wizards will be back in the next version, but we will have to make do until then. A possible workaround to this limitation is to format a report layout default per client install. How do you do this? Open the report solution found under NAV Client Programs directory, modify it, and save it. Remember to do this on each client utilized for report development, or save it to all the machines that do. This custom report solution will be the starting layout for all reports moving forward. Tables consist of TableX data regions and contain the following section types: table header and footer, which are visible once per table, and group header and footer, which are visible once per group definition. Headers have the ability to repeat on a per-page basis via the repeat column headers property in the table properties. There is a trick to making this work, though. You need to go to the Repeat on New Page property for the Rows Advanced properties at the bottom of the Visual Studio window. The table details repeat for every line in the dataset. A nice feature when adding the header footer to a table is that any integer or decimal value will automatically have a sum expression in the footer without having to depend on flow fields or calculated totals coming from NAV. All the talk about putting the dataset expression in the header without the indirect reference is true, but reports that are modified the most, aka documents, still have this limitation. The rule to go by is that if header has data that will change over the course of the report, then you'll have to use indirect references, and NAV standard reports will use the GetData and SetData functions. There is an alternative that I'd like to show, though I'm not sure exactly how practical it is. I think it has a lot less code involved and is a lot easier to debug to see what is happening. We're going to create a new report, this time with sales header and sales line. And I'm going to have the document number, name, address, city, and order date for the header information. And I'm going to add a subsidiary data item of sales line, number, description, quantity, price, and amount. And I need to relate the two tables via data item link. So nothing new here. This is all very standard stuff. And I'm going to show all the sales headers, so I'm not going to be doing any functions there. And in this particular case, I want to add sales line captions. I've finished designing my data set, so I'm going to go to the Visual Studio, insert my header, and this time I'm going to want to show multiple sales orders but have a different sales order on a per page basis. So I want to have a page break in here, and I can do that using the list control. With the list control, I go to the TableX properties and set the data set result so that all of my child controls within the list control in the body will inherit that data set. And I have to right click on this little orange thing just perfectly until I get this, and I go to row group properties. I want to add a grouping on sales order number because I want to change it on every sales header, and I want a page break between each instance of a group. Now I'm going to do what you would expect as far as the sales line. So I'm going to have 6 columns. And very similar to what I had done before, I'm going to put in the fields and drag and drop the headers. Okay, so right now, if I wanted to put the bill to name, address, city, the order number, and the date on the top, it wouldn't work because it would only grab the first value and it would show that first value for every page. So it would do no good. So what I need to do is I need to have text boxes individually in my body section within the list control that are linked to the sales line control, and I have it linked to the sales line table here because this is the repeating loop that has the grouping. Remember that the data set is completely flattened when sent out to Visual Studio. So for every sales line record, it has the same sales header information repeated for each line. So I'll need to grab the first sales header information for each grouping that is going to be here. I want to be sure that I know the name of the sales line control, which I'm going to name sales lines, just so that I can reference it when I link up the text boxes, and I'll show that now. I'm going to put in a text box, which I'm going to set to the sales header number. You can see that the name for the text box has been defaulted from the value in there, and I want to set the repeat with property to sales lines so that now these two are linked. So not only can I reference this text box with the sales NO_sales header, but now it is linked. And I'm going to do the same thing with these boxes. address, repeat with sales lines, text box, bill to city, repeat with sales lines, and finally order date, and repeat with sales lines. So now I have the body section fully defined. I would actually make these visible or hidden true because I don't want these to be visible, but for the purposes of this example, I just want you to see the boxes repeating here. So I'm going to add a text box up to the front here, make it nice and long, and copy, paste a couple of times. So this text box, I'm going to want to put an expression in there, and that expression is going to be report items bill to name sales header dot value. Okay, it's not exactly pretty, but it should get us the report as we would expect it. So, as I said, that now instead of having GetData 1, 10, 1, 20, 1, whatever, it would, and having defined that hidden field, all we need to do is have a one-to-one relationship. The boxes are all here on the report list so that we can find out how it is set or formatted directly. So I save that. I can go in here, save it to the report, and save my NAV report. And I can go run the report. I must have set that to the wrong name, but as we go from page to page, you can see that the header information is now updating on each page. Previously, we would have had the option to put formatting, logic, and all other functions in cal in the report triggers or in the section data controls. Now we need to think about how and where the VB.NET expressions need to exist and how to format them in Visual Studio. This slide shows some of the more common string expressions that can be used as value expressions in a data control: concatenation, date format, substrings, and format strings, which this one happens to show a phone number format. Here are some other commonly used expressions. Date, such as dateAdd, get the date part, and data conversion calls. Logic expressions are most commonly going to be found in visibility or color properties, such as black or red in budget to actuals, or pale green on the even rows in the simple data set. For more complex calculations that cannot be accomplished with a simple if-then statement, you can create functions in the report code. Here's an example of a function called alternate color, which will generate a green bar report. The output can be seen in the next slide. Next, we're going to be going through two more examples, the first being an item catalog with an icon that will change based on the inventory levels, and a simple customer performance dashboard utilizing graphs inside Visual Studio. In this report, we're going to have little icons tell you if the inventory is 0, greater than 0, or less than 0. So in the data item in the fields, we're just going to select a few fields here that we would put on an item catalog. And because this is an item catalog that is going to be presented to customers, I would like to add a logo to it. So a way that I can put a logo is by using a cal global. And I can instantiate that global in the cal editor. I wanted to show this because, as you can see, that unlike reports in previous versions, all the triggers are completely flattened and columns do not have their own triggers. So I can put this on pre-report. So I'm going to get the company information, calc field to the blob before I send it to Visual Studio, and as a column, I'm going to put in the global variable and give it a name. I don't need a logo. Now this is not very efficient because it's sending the bitmap or the blob with each item record. For the purposes of this example, I'm doing this, but probably you would set it up that you would only send it once. Now I'm ready to go to Visual Studio. I'm going to view report data. And I am going to add images. I'm going to embed them into the report. So I have 3 images. I've got inventory green, inventory red, and inventory 0. So now these are embedded. I can insert my header. Go to the toolbox and drop in an image. which is going to be based on a database. I'm going to select the field and make sure it's defined as a bitmap, and I'm going to have it as original size. Expand that out. Next, I'm going to have a table which is going to have my actual items in here, and I need 2 more columns. And I can define my values. And get rid of captions there and use the captions from NAV. And also, I can select the text box so I can get to the properties. Go to the unit price format. Now in here for the inventory item, well, first before we do that, I want to have the color be gray in the header, and I also want this report header, or this header, to repeat on each page of the catalog. And I need to have the column, repeat column headers, repeat columns, headers set to true. And down here is the second property that we need to set. You have row groups and column groups. We need to go into advanced mode, and you can see all the columns and rows set here. I've only got one. I don't have any grouping, so I just have header and detail. So I select that, and I make sure repeat on new page is set to true. So I need to set both of those in order for the header to repeat. And lastly, I want to set a green bar on the data row. So hopefully I can go here, go to background color, go to expression, and I want to put in a expression of if row number Now I'm assuming that the table in there is table x1. It's the only table that I have. I will double check that in a minute. Mod2 equals 0. I want pale green. Otherwise, I want transparent. So it doesn't complain, so I would assume that table x1 is okay, but let's double check that. I go here, I look my name, there's table x1. Now I could say this, name it whatever I want, as long as I name it the same place both places. It doesn't update, so you have, if you change it one place, it's going to break the other place. Just have to be real careful about that. Last thing we need to do is we want the items, the inventory, to show the different images that we have imported. Because if I run it now, it'll just show the quantity on hand, and I don't want that. So in this text box, I actually get rid of that, and I go to the toolbox and I drop in an image. And it's the embedded image, and rather than just use one image, I actually want to use an expression, which is switch, fields, inventory, item dot value, less than 0, show the inventory red image, equal to 0, I show inventory 0 image, greater than 0, inventory green. So this is the basic command that we use. And I click OK. Now I should have everything I need. I don't have a title. I would have had labels for that, or I can hard code a label, but just for the moment we're going to have this as is. Maybe make this a little bit bigger. And I don't know if it's possible to, well, we'll see how it goes. So we save the report and we go back into NAV and we load the RDLC and we save the report. I run the report and you can see the quantity on hand. I click on the next page. I have the column heading repeating on the page. I also have the green bar view of the report. Now the images are changing sizes based on the size of the column. You'd have to work on fixing the size of the row and whatnot in order for that to stay the same, but that's stuff that you can make pretty on your own. Alright, so then the next demonstration we have is creating a simple customer dashboard, which should look something like this. Going to have the customer name, balance, and sales. And then I'm going to have a subsidiary date item of sales line. And I'm going to show, bring over bill to customer. Sorry, not bill to customer. I'm going to bring over outstanding amount and shipment date. And I'm going to want captions for all of this. I'm also going to want to bring over some captions for my reports, which is going to be top sales, top 5 customers in sales, top balance, top 5 at O plus money, and outstanding orders. Let's see, is there anything else that we would need? Nope, that's it. Go to View, Layout. Now I'm not going to be using any list or repeating controls. I'm going to be going based off of charts. And this is very similar to how it was done in a 2009. It's just there are lots of little differences, which you can see if you've done this type of report before. If you haven't, this is all new. Actually, I want to go to Title Properties. Top Sales. And I want the customers. Sales into the data fields. Oops. And customer into the category fields, and get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this. And I want the color to be green. Drop in my second chart. Just going to have top balance. And going to set balance and customers. Then I can get rid of my axis, 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 and set the color to red. And the last chart I'm going to drop in here is going to be a line chart. And in the, put the name and the series, outstanding amount at the top, shipment date on the bottom. And that should be it. So I hit save. Go in here and I load the report, the Visual Studio layout, and I save the report. If I run it now in Visual Studio, in RTC, I actually forgot the top 5 part, so let's fix that, which is an important bit. Now I need to go into the chart properties and set a filter. The expression is going to be based off of the sales, because this is a sales. Make sure that's defined as a float. And the operator, I can select a top n or top percent. In this case, I want this to be equal to the top 5. And the same thing here, except in this case it's going to be balance, top n equal to 5. Now I'll reload this, save the report, and run it and see if we get a better result. So it's the top 5. Even though it's only showing the 1, it should be the top 5. So that concludes the presentations and the demos. This presentation, the PowerPoint, along with instructions for how to run each of the demonstrations in detail, is on the Tectura wiki. Here is the URL, and I will be putting a Camtasia of this presentation with the demos up to the website hopefully tomorrow, if not the beginning of next week. So that's a lot of information, kind of crammed down your throats. It has been about 45 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments in relation to NAV 2013 reports? Or you can actually ask anything about reports, queries, page development, ribbons. You can open up your microphone or type in the chat bar.